And we're off.
Welcome, everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome so outstanding people for maybe one of the most important topics within the Belgian AI Week related to the future of jobs, skills, and education. And today we will welcome various people, outstanding experts from Belgium, but also from France and the Netherlands. And we have the pleasure to welcome, in the first place, Vice Prime Minister Petra de Sutter, that will do a short introductory keynote. Petra de Sutter was sworn in on the 1st October 2020 as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Public Services, Civil Services, Telecommunication and Post under Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, as you know. She has 6 years of political experience, as well as a long career as a gynecologist and fertility expert. She entered politics in 2014 as a member of the Flemish Green Party Groen, motivated by the desire to combat the use of harmful substances in everyday environment. We had the opportunity to meet her 2 weeks ago with the AI Law and Ethics Working Groups with Nathalie Smua and Jelle Oudemakers. And we've learned also that she was very involved at the European Parliament in all the things around AI. So now, as Petra de Sutter can be present, I propose to launch her video. Alexander, or Casper. Okay, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I want to start by thanking AI for Belgium for inviting me to take part in this event today. Even though I cannot be with you in person, I'm very glad to have this opportunity, not only because I'm personally interested in the field, but also because AI and machine learning are becoming an ever-growing part of our society. Last week, I read a newspaper article about how artificial intelligence is being used in pioneering MRI technology for bone scans at the University Hospital of Ghent. And the new technique means we will no longer have to use CT scans, which can cause cells to turn cancerous because it's radiation. So this will really make a difference to patients. And I'm doubly excited. This is an important new development, but also UZ Ghent is my alma mater. It's up to us as a government to make sure that our country keeps up with new developments in AI and digital technology, not least because of the enormous opportunities they offer for businesses and for our economy. It is for this reason that I have included in my policy note my commitment to developing a national AI strategy and action plan, together with my colleagues, State Secretary of Digitalization Mathieu Michel and the Minister of Economy Pierre-Yves Dermagne. Together with machine learning and big data, AI has entered a new era. So it's vital to have this plan with clear objectives and guidelines. Our goal is to stimulate innovation in business without disregarding the protection of our citizens. Regulations on algorithm transparency, accountability, data access and processing all are crucial in helping shape this growing industry and the trust that it needs. As a Minister for Public Administration, I recognize the opportunities that machine learning, for example, natural language processing, can offer to public services. We can use AI to help individuals and firms more effectively and efficiently. That is why I have provided a budget to help with the design and implementation of chatbots. And chatbots are just one of the possibilities. Our citizens expect an efficient and accurate service from their government, and AI can help us deliver that, whether through planning appointments, automatically filling in forms, or even predicting the fire safety of buildings. This is all to our general benefit. Artificial intelligence is part of the evolution towards digitalization. It is clear that the idea that AI will lead to mass job loss is simply not accurate. It is possible that around 9% of existing jobs could become automated, but AI will also lead to a huge number of new jobs, staff to build new systems, more staff to maintain and manage them. It's vital, therefore, that we in Belgium make sure that our citizens develop the necessary skills to be able to make the most of these new opportunities that AI and digitalization can offer. But I'm afraid we have a hole in our bucket. Only 10 days after International Women's Day, I would like to focus on an aspect that is very important to me, the gender gap, specifically in ICT and STEM jobs, which are the profiles we need in the AI field. Our country, like most of Europe, urgently needs to develop STEM skills, starting in school and continuing right through lifelong professional learning, and the need is greatest among women. Let me share a remarkable number with you. Only 7 in 1,000 young women graduated in a STEM subject in 2020. Among young men, that was 21 in 1,000. There are 4 times as many men working in technical sectors like ICT than there are women. European numbers in general are not much better. It is clear that we seriously need to boost the number of women and girls choosing STEM subjects, and ultimately the number of women and girls going into STEM careers. We desperately need female engineers, data specialists, programmers, you name it, to be able to become frontrunners in the technology field of which AI is a part. To give just one specific example, let me return to the chatbots that we want to introduce as a government. I want the algorithms of those chatbots to be written by both men and women to avoid the problems that typically occur as a result of gender bias. We know that algorithms reflect the values, belief systems, and experiences of the programmer. So we need to be concerned about the lack of ethnic diversity and female representation in STEM professions and tech industry that creates these algorithms. How can governments remedy this? On Friday, 5th of March this year, the Federal Council of Ministers approved an action plan, Women in Digital. This plan consists of 5 strategic aims, each translated into concrete actions. It will be rolled out not only by the federal government, but by all the Belgian governments. And not just governments, we want to engage unions, non-profits, private organizations, the educational sector. Our aim is to increase the representation of women in IT and STEM fields. By working together, we want to see a quantum leap in the number of women active in these professions, from junior assistant to CEO. And we must start with the very youngest. A few weeks ago, the newspaper De Morgen published the results of a doctoral research thesis from the Free University in Brussels, the VUB. The research looked at young people aged 10 to 13 and showed that it was clear that stereotypes are already at play when these young people start to make academic decisions that will shape their whole lives. Boys become engineers, policemen, managers, and expect to succeed, to be strong, and to be dominant. Girls are associated with care and social responsibility. One thing worth noting is that it appears that the girls choose so-called feminine careers because of a lack of self-confidence. Boys do not tend to question their abilities, while girls tend to assume that they do not have the right skills to do these traditional masculine jobs. If we really want to work on gender inequality, we have to start at a very young age. And that's why one of the action points in the Women in Digital plan is about collaboration between the private sector and nurseries to create gender-aware educational games for our toddlers and infants, games which encourage scientific and construction skills and activities. Once they're older, we want to encourage girls to take part in DG camps or after-school activities where they can learn to program. To support young women and girls academically, female digital ambassadors will be recruited to share their experiences and expertise through school visits and online. It's important to recruit more women, and once they're recruited, we also want to keep them. This will be done by organizing inclusive job fairs aimed at bringing women together in the digital world. Female role models have to be more visible, especially in the media, and our recruitment policies have to be more transparent, certainly when it comes to salary and opportunities for promotion. We also must find a better balance between work and private. The federal government will also be refreshing its image as an employer that is attractive to women. The plan is also mindful of the diversity among women. The goal is to reach all women, women with a disability, women from ethnic minorities, older women. There are just more barriers than gender. These are some of a whole of series of action points. The Women in Digital Plan will soon be going before the Interministerial Conference for validation. Meanwhile, the federal government has already taken multiple measures to close the digital gap, in particular among women, and these will sit alongside the Women in Digital Plan. Each minister is required to implement gender mainstreaming in his or her own policies. 6 million euros have already been made available to support operators in closing the digital gap, and we're currently working on the automatic allocation of the social telecom tariff so that more people get access to internet and telephony. I strongly believe that this growth in digitalization and artificial intelligence can help our society move forward on a number of levels. In health, in education, in lifelong learning, in public administration, and of course also in energy saving and sustainability measures. It's clear that we as a country must not miss this direction of travel towards a better, more sustainable future. We have to prepare for what lies ahead by investing in AI, and for this we're going to need all our talents. I'd like to end by quoting Michelle Obama, who has done so much for the emancipation of women worldwide. No country can ever truly flourish if it stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself of the contributions of half of its citizens. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to feel the support of so many ministers of the government at the regional and federal level during this week. And so I have now the pleasure to welcome the two first panelists that will sketch the context of the discussion. François Tadei, you are a polytechnician in France, that means much, biologist and research director at INSERM, but you are also honorary doctor of a Belgian university of Louvain. And you are the author of the book Learning in the 21st Century. You advocate innovation and interdisciplinary approaches in both research and education, and your interest in collective intelligence is rooted in your background as a biology engineer. You studied the evolution of bacteria and were inspired to understand living things, how to survive, how to adapt. If bacteria are able to self-organize and co-evolve, their ability to cooperate and exchange information, why not us? It is this reflection that led you to create the CRI, the Centre de Recherche Interdisciplinaire in Paris, a unique place where people from very different backgrounds collaborate to co-construct a better future together. And thank you so much, François, to have welcomed me for 1 year in the CRI when I was in Paris. Now I will introduce Jeroen Fransen. So, Jeroen, you are Mr. Labor Market, I would say, in Belgium, because you have conducted the most impactful study on that recently, Be the Change and this update. So you are senior labor market expert for the largest Belgian sector federation, Agoria, who is one of the founding partners of AI for Belgium. Agoria represents over 2,000 companies with technological and digital main activities. Before joining Agoria Study Center, you were in charge of several software building companies, mainly focused on HR software. Recently, you got well known and appreciated because of your analysis of the impact on digitization on the Belgian labor market, better known as Be the Change. So that I was telling, with a solid data set on one hand and a range of inspiring strategical ideas on the other hand, Jeroen, you have challenged the Belgian authorities, other sectors, companies, and their workers to look the change in the eyes and to adopt a proactive attitude to get the best out of this challenge from a macroeconomic and from a personal perspective. So I will let you the floor for about 20 minutes, I think, before we begin the panel. Please.
Thank you, Nathanael, for these very kind words, and also thank you to Ms. Petra de Sutter for her inspiring and challenging speech. In fact, in the first part of this debate, I'm trying together with Francois to draw the scene of Belgian and European labor markets. We will start with the economical situation. What about demand and supply on the labor market? We will take a deep dive into the new skill demand, and we will conclude on either trends in new ways of working or trends in new ways of learning. In this first part, we're not particularly deep diving into artificial intelligence, more into digitization. But then when the other panelists join us, we go in depth, and we will be debating on specific AI-based applications. If you allow me, Francois, I would like to start with the work I did, a brief summary on that. In 2018, we started with our Be the Change analysis, trying to measure both from the quantitative and from the qualitative perspective what the evolutions on Belgian labor market look like. The evolutions mainly driven by digitization. And what we found was quite challenging. We found that 4.5 million of Belgians, nearly everyone working, should keep their skills up to date due to digitization. But on the other hand, we found, and we should tell this brutal job truth, that 300,000 people in Belgium are going to lose their jobs. They will have to get reskilled and start doing other jobs because their profiles are no longer in demand. But yet, even if we keep those two groups, the 4.5 million and the 300,000 active, if we keep them working, even then we will lack over 500,000 people between now and 2030, for whom we will not find, there are jobs for them, but we will not find the right people to execute them. So we're facing a huge challenge on the Belgian labor market, both from the quantitative and from the qualitative perspective. So for every job killed, there will be 3 new job openings between now and 2030. I don't know whether you recognize this situation, Francois, in France, and whether you want to add something to that.
Thanks for this nice intro. I think the problem is worldwide about the same. And it's, I would say there is one more dimension to it. It's not one form of retraining. It's sort of an evolving form of retraining because it's not like you have to do it once, because AI, updates, machine learning are learning super fast. And there is so many other dimensions that we have to adapt to in the meantime. There is the climate crisis, there is the COVID crisis, there is many things. So, retraining is going to be an absolute need for all of us. And this is going to be ever more true in the future. So there is a real acceleration of those changes. And the question is, how do we update our ability to learn much faster? And our institutions for learning, like Louvain-la-Neuve, is, even though it has La Neuve, it has hundreds of centuries of, has centuries of history behind. And universities are evolving and schools are evolving. The question is, are they evolving fast enough compared to the speed at which machines are evolving? And if you evolve slower than your environment, then you have the risk of becoming obsolete before you know it. So that's what evolutionary biology tells us. And so I think that the faster AI progress, the more individual human intelligence has to progress. And maybe one of the best ways of promoting this is collective intelligence. And it's impossible for any of us to read, say, all of Wikipedia. Whereas, Diderot could read, the rule of the encyclopedia in the 18th century. But in the meantime, there's been 100-fold more scientific publications every 100 years, which is a millionfold more. A millionfold more is, no one can read a millionfold more papers. Only an AI can do it. And so what it is that you have to learn, maybe a colleague can tell you, or maybe a machine can tell you, and maybe we can use combinations of human intelligence and artificial intelligence to try to do together things that we could not do alone. So when humans and machines can do things that neither can do alone, then we'll probably be much better off in our future. But we have to start training for this as young as possible. And there again, we have to work also on what are the human skills that machines are not in the foreseeable future able to achieve. And so maybe, the more machines progress, the more our humanity has to progress. And so it's, if you compute with machines in their ability to memorize and compute, you'll lose. But if you develop your emotional skills, your social skills, your creativity skills, your ability to think out of the box, because machines can optimize what's within the box. But if you're able to go one step further or several steps further, you'll probably be much better off.
Okay, I join you, of course, on that. Perhaps want to come back to the increase of the labor demand in Belgium. Typically, we see two groups. We see a big increase in people taking care, people educating, and on the other hand, an increase in the demand of digital experts, technical experts. And I think that there's a zone in between where the people taking care could use the technological tools to make their work more comfortable, more efficient. In fact, we were talking skills demand, and in the analysis we did, of course, we saw the demand for digital professional skills rise, but we even saw a more important increase of the need of soft skills, such as virtual collaboration, such as multilingualism, resilience, self-development. So do you agree with me on the fact that in a digitally evolving or an AI-based evolving world, it's not only the technical aspects that we should take into account?
Oh, certainly. I think it's going to be very, very true. And your minister even gave an example of some job in hospitals being improved by the arrival of AI. So it will improve the care, but the more maybe the AI will help put the diagnosis, but you do want a human being that is well trained in emotional skills to tell you what the diagnosis is, especially if it's a bad news. So, you know, I think it's going to be augmented humans that will be able to do things. And indeed, those soft skills will play an ever more important role. And I think one of the dimensions that she quickly highlighted also in her speech is the need of ethics. And the ability to think about, you know, the ethical implications and applications of the progress of technology is going to be very needed. And unfortunately, from the studies I know so far, when you study engineering, your ability to think ethically decreases with numbers of years you spent in an engineering school. By the way, your empathy decreased by the numbers of years you spent in a medical school. And your cooperative skills decrease by numbers of years you spend in a business school. Okay, so clearly we have a problem. You know, we have to see that was out of Belgium. Maybe Belgium is an exception in that.
No, I don't think so.
But we have to be very careful with these sorts of things, and we have to create better humans, and so that, you know, they can do things that machines will never be able to do, like, you know, having empathy for a patient when you have to announce a very sad news to that individual and his family or her family.
So in fact, digitization and artificial intelligence also force us to increase our human capacity, our human added value. That's what you're saying, Francois.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And so, but the AI can do other things. The AI can help you, for instance, know what you know, and know what you don't know, and know what you should know, and tell you, you know, what are the best ways that others have explored in order to get to know what you need to know to adapt to a changing world. And so I think that, you know, you can, we can build Socratic technologies. We can build technologies that, you know, very much like Socrates, we're helping you to have, in French we say maïotique, you know, this Socratic method, and have this ability to know thyself and know thy world, and know where to find meanings and purpose. What's your ikigai? Or, you know, there's different traditions that are thinking about this, but I think we need to develop machines that can help us identify what are our added value as human beings, definitely.
Okay. So you're saying that one should know himself or herself. That's the basis for your employability. In fact, this brings us to the third part. I would like to talk to you about our new ways of organizing work. First part, we said that okay, jobs will be destroyed, but there will be more jobs created. Second part, there is a pretty important challenge ahead of us to develop digital skills, but also let's not forget about the very important human skills. But on the new organization of work, I found out that that in Belgium we are quite moving at a fast pace. We're no longer organizing work based on contracts and functions. We're fastly evolving towards project organizations where people could play different roles and play the roles that match best with their own capacities. Are you into that project and role idea?
Yeah, I think that, you know, if you're able to face challenge and, you know, be able to go from a dream to a project, and from a project to a reality and an achievement, you'll have a job. You know, it may be a very different job from the one you used to have, but, you know, the ability to deliver what's expected and to create new solutions and to face challenges is going to be very needed, because we'll have many new challenges that, you know, had nothing to do with the 20th century challenges. So this ability to develop those meta skills, which allow you to be able to accept the challenge. And, you know, when you're in a crisis mode, the Chinese says that, you know, there is danger and opportunity in the character crisis, and you have to identify the dangers and try to avoid them, but you have to try to see what are the opportunities and how you can, you know, take advantage of them to make a difference. And those abilities are are actually trained at the very moment when we speak, because we are all facing, a huge crisis without precedent. But we are not enough invited to reflect on our abilities to face those crises, to be able to identify in those challenges opportunities and abilities to create projects that are meaningful and impactful. And so if you can identify what it is that you like, what it is that the world needs, what it is that you can do or that you can learn, and what are the resources around you. If you can identify the intersection between those four things, you find this ikigai in the Japanese word, and you can find this purpose and this impact. And it might be a very dynamical perspective, because what the world needs will evolve, what you would know will evolve, what are the resources around you will evolve, and maybe even what you love will evolve.
In this reflection exercise, Francois, I think that also experiment is very important, and I think that we should evolve to a context where failure is an option. Am I right?
Yes, basically, that's what at least I've learned from biological systems. Biological systems are evolving thanks to the errors they do. And so errors are maybe very creative, and even if they are not, you can learn from your mistakes. But sometimes some of your errors are hinting at a very interesting potential. But you have to be able to not be punished for this, but have the time to reflect on what are the sources of your errors. Is it some creative insight, or is it just some fact that you didn't understood well enough? But in both cases, you have to be able to adjust and to reflect and to be more creative. And as one of the people in the chat is saying, indeed, creativity and critical thinking are completely needed and not enough developed in the schools as they exist now, at least in most schools. And this ability to understand not only the black box that the machine is, but also the black box that our brain is. Okay, of course we do mistakes. And it's normal, we are, and in Latin we say errare humanum est, or errors is what make us humans, and to err is also the source of our ability to explore. And we need this ability ever more, because we have to think about a very different future than our past, because we are currently on the very wrong track.
Okay, so we're on our fourth item on new ways of learning. You mentioned that we're not used to work in a project environment and an experimental environment. What are the lessons to be learned for our educational system? How could they prepare themselves?
Well, traditionally, at least in France, but I imagine it's not so different in Belgium, students are competing with one another. They are working on subjects they've not decided, and they are working on themes that are closed themes, like the list of rivers in Europe, or list of amino acids and so on. They are not invited to reflect collectively on open-ended problems that they feel that resonate with them and that they've chosen to dig. And I think that would be one way to do it. And interestingly, that's what Taiwan is doing at the national level. That's what Finland is doing ever more. That's what Canada is doing. And it's probably not by chance that those countries are the leading countries in PISA. Mm-hmm. And so, because that's also a way to motivate much more the young ones, but not only the young ones. It also work at university level. It also work in professional development. So this ability to learn to face open challenges collectively is, I think, one of the, OECD defines them as one of the key 21st century skills that we have to develop.
Yeah, I would like to add something. I found that we're not, in fact, measuring the most effective way one is learning. We're imposing the same learning method for every single one in our secondary teaching system. So first of all, I think that we should draw the specific analysis on what is the most effective way for one individual to learn. I'm also convinced that we should need less conscious ways of learning. seems like a punishment at this moment. So I think that both gamification or peer learning should be more practiced than we do. And I certainly agree with you, Francois, that we're looking towards our children, but also towards the people in the same function, with the same glasses. That they need to do to execute the same series of tasks, and we're not looking at them as diverse human beings that could be complementary in projects, for instance. And we're looking at everyone from the same position. So I think that should change in the future.
Oh, definitely. I think one of the things we could be, I mean, we are actually prototyping this, okay? We are basically, we have an AI that, thanks to machine learning, has read all of Wikipedia and can turn any text into a vector, okay? And so if you tell that AI what is your project, or even what's your dream, you know, it can build a GPS of dreams and of projects, and it can identify people that have a similar position in that dream space. Okay, and so if you find people that share your dream, then you're like John Lennon. You may be a dreamer, but you're not the only one anymore. And when you know that you're not the only one, you may be able to join them, and you may be able to make a difference and turn your dream into a project, and have people with complementary skills that come together to transform that dream into a project and then into a reality. And that's the typical technologies where the machines can empower our creative potential. So it's not the machine that's going to be creative, but the machine is going to do the matchmaking. Very much, you know, Tinder is doing matchmaking on for different purposes.
Okay, I think that time is going faster. I think that this is enough for the first part. I see Nathanael nodding, and Nathanael is going to introduce three more panelists, and then I'm going to try and challenge them with a question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this fascinating introduction. And I will have the pleasure to introduce you, Kathleen Müller. You are the president and co-founder of ALI, which is an independent organization that promotes responsible development, deployment, and use of AI. You are a member of the high-level expert group of the European Commission that advised the European Commission on economic, legal, social, and ethical strategies for AI. And you were the rapporteur of the EESC, excuse me, the European Social and Economic Committee on Artificial Intelligence in Society, and the EESC opinion on the white paper on AI. And you added the EESC thematic study group on AI from 2018 to 2020. So we met several times. You advised the Council of Europe on the impact of AI on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. You have a Master of Law and by training, and you worked as a Dutch qualified lawyer for over 14 years prior to committing your effort to the topic of responsible AI. Thank you so much, Kathleen, to be there. So I will then introduce Laurent Ledoux as the lead of AI and future of works in AI for Belgium. But Laurent, you have a short bio that is not so short. So you are partner and chairman of the board of FUSIS, a team of experienced managers specializing in collaborative governance. You have various experience in the private and public sector, and you are specialized in modernizing business unit and administration. You were previously interim CEO for a short bio that is not so short. So you are partner and chairman of the board of this. Yeah, excuse me, I have an echo. Okay, so you have a huge experience in the public service, and you served as president of some FODs, some federal public services, and you were very active at Arthur de Little, ENG, but also in Médecins Sans Frontières, and you speak fluently 7 languages. You are the director and redactor-in-chief of Philo magazine, Philosophy and Management magazine, and founder member of Teach for Belgium and member of various boards. So thank you, Laurent. I know that you had a personal urgency, so thank you to come with us in this condition. That is so great. And then Eckhart Ernst, I will introduce you and thank you for being there. You are chief of the macroeconomic policies and jobs unit at the International Labour Organization. Currently, you work on how to address the socio-economic crisis resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. You are also widely published on the implication of artificial intelligence, robots, and blockchain application for the future of work and the transition to a sustainable society. You co-founded in 2017 in Geneva, the Geneva Macro Labs, a platform to identify, develop, and implement solutions to address global challenges and existential risks. Together with your team, you bring together international thought leader and practitioner to promote and advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda. Previously, you worked at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the European Central Bank. Eckhart, I will suggest you participate to the panel, but you could also maybe give us a wrap up at the end with your global view on this question. So thank you for having joined us. And Jeroen, the floor is yours.
Thank you for these introductions. They made me curious on some words you used, and the first question concerning that is for Katelijne. Katelijne, Nathanael was talking that you were working on responsible development. What is this word responsible about?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nathanael, and thank you, Jeroen, for having me. I've been working on this topic for quite some time now, and we choose the word responsible artificial intelligence because we want it to be an all-encompassing term. And what I mean by that is that we think that to have AI land in society in a responsible manner, you have to look at it from all sides. So you have to look at it from a legal perspective, a societal perspective, an ethical perspective, an economic perspective, educational perspective, labor perspective, and so on. And we also always stress that responsible AI is not just about ethics in AI. Ethics is a very important element of responsible AI, but we also stress that AI is not a completely unregulated technology. It does not operate in a lawless world. So there is a lot of legislation that already applies to the effects, for example, of artificial intelligence. It also means to say that we should look at we should have a life cycle approach towards looking at AI. And what we mean by that is that we have to look at the technology in the development phase, but also in the deployment phase and in the use phase. Because you could imagine that there is a technology that is completely perfect. It is safe, it is bias-free, etc., etc. Think of facial recognition that recognizes every skin color, that recognizes women and men in the same manner, everybody, everywhere. That technology, as perfect as it is, might be unacceptable under certain circumstances or at all. There are discussions ongoing about whether we should accept such a technology, even if it's perfect. So that is why we also want to look at the use of artificial intelligence and not just the development. And the last part of responsible AI, in our opinion, is that it should involve all stakeholders. It should involve the policymakers, the developers. It should involve civil society institutions, academia, but also all expertises. Like I said, if you want to look at the technology from all sides, you have to involve the lawyers, you have to involve the economists, the labor specialists, basically like we're doing now. You have to involve all those views and all those interests to come to a responsible use of artificial intelligence in our society.
Okay, thank you, Katelijne. So responsible as in multi-perspective, probably also meaning that we will need multi-talented or multiple roles involved in the AI implementation. Thank you for that. Eckhard, when Nathanael was explaining what you are doing, he was talking about that you were working on alternative paths for jobs and earnings, and the word alternative triggered me. Could you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for this great panel discussion so far. I think one of the perspectives that I was missing so far in the discussion is really about the earnings side to it. So we talk a lot about jobs and job destruction, job creation, etc. But there's an inequality perspective to it. I mean, the one thing that we have been stressing at the International Labour Organization very much so is that there's enormous gains to be had from these new technologies, and we know that already. Actually, yesterday, somebody from OpenAI was mentioning that over the next 10 years, you should expect something around $13,000 gain per US citizen over the next 10 years in terms of these new technologies. But unfortunately, it doesn't end up in the pocket of most people, and ends up in very few pockets only. And so the diverging paths that we see, I think it's a really concern that we all have, and the question is how to address that. And I saw several possibilities, and I think one of the issues that we have identified is that you need, as Katelijne was mentioning, you need to bring in all the stakeholders on board. That means also obviously sharing these technological gains at the firm level, but also at the societal level through, for instance, new forms of taxation, through new forms of engagement with state actors. For instance, one thing that we have been suggesting here is to actually create a sovereign digital wealth fund, where states would invest in these companies to take advantage of all these gains that they're making, and then distributing through UBI form type of general income for the larger population, similar to what other countries are already doing with their oil fund. So I think we can do the same for digital funds. So I think that we need to be a bit creative, because these are societal gains that we can reap, and that we should try to distribute as widely as possible, because it's really all our contribution to it. It's like we all contribute to see these new technologies with our personal data, with our interaction with these systems, and I think we should all benefit from it as much as possible. I would just want to add something to what Françoise was saying. I think that this polarization between those people who actually gain from these new technologies and those people who suffer from it because they lose their jobs or their work will be automated. This problem is even more acute outside Europe. So we see a lot of these things happening in countries in the south, in Brazil, in South Africa, and so on. And there the problem is much more acute than what you see here. So trying to find solutions, institutional solutions for these countries to get this transition path right, I think will be an enormous challenge. And digital infrastructure, the digital gap that was talked about, I think is just one example of how to solve this issue. So I think we should not forget that we actually have an enormous developmental challenge ahead of us that we need to collectively identify solutions for.
Okay, thank you. So you're talking about both societal gains and productivity gains that might end up contributing to our welfare, but also to our well-being, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And you were talking about taxation. That, of course, triggers me. You were talking about general income. This is pretty alternative indeed. I have a proposal to do when you talk about taxation. What do you think about taxation on every form of complexity? Could we tax solutions that are too complex for us people?
Well, I mean, I guess there are different ways of changing our tax system. I think that always the challenge is how do you identify the tax base. Huh? I mean, I think that's always a challenge. So how do you measure this type of complexity? I think that some of the solutions was that what France has offered to say, well, we actually tax digital consumption rather than production or profit at the originating space. So I think that is maybe an easier way to identify. You know, you can identify consumption. I would not necessarily disagree with you. I think one of the things that I also mentioned in some of the publication that I released last year is that it's really hard to identify exactly the value added of each individual consumer or each individual producer, because we don't know. You know, it's like, what do I personally contribute to these digital platforms? I don't know. So actually tax me on my marginal contribution to this platform is almost impossible. So you have to find some kind of collective way of taxing that, and maybe a simple VAT on digital consumption might be much easier to implement than having complex solutions for that.
Okay, thank you. I see that that Laurent reached the office in a safe way. Laurent, when Nathanael was describing you, he was saying that you were working on collaborative governance. The word was outspoken several times during this session. Could you explain collaborative governance a little bit more?
Well, it would take too long to explain it fully, but I will stick to the essential, and I think related to AI. One of the key aspects to promote collaborative governance is to have clear roles and responsibilities for everybody within the organizations, and for them to be accessible to anybody within the organization. So if we want to implement this, I think that AI can really improve things. Basically, I would compare it to what François Tadei was saying about organic living systems. Basically, collaborative governance leads to a way of management which is similar to a human body instead of a robot. So basically, when I say you need to clarify roles and responsibilities, it means that instead of sticking to broad functions, you go down to the cells. You go down to very specific roles and responsibilities. So basically, instead of looking at the arm, you look at all the cells within the arm. And of course, this allows for a much better functioning, more agile functioning of the human body than it is with a robot. But of course, it requires much more sophisticated coordination between those roles and responsibilities. And I do believe that, although it's not yet the case, AI will be able in the future to assist basically the coordination of those roles and responsibilities in a much more effective way than we can do it today. And again, as François was saying, this will allow us to concentrate on the real value added of human beings, which is the human interactions beyond those roles and responsibilities, which will be assisted by AI probably in the future. For example, in refining the roles which are needed to perform the purposes and the objectives of the organization, which will also allow to match those roles inhabited by different people, which will also allow to assist in defining the type of training which is related to those roles and how people can grow into those roles through better training. So all this will be probably in the future facilitated by AI, so that once again we can concentrate on the real value added of human beings in their interactions.
Okay, thank you for that, Laurent. I have a first general question. So we try to explain that in Belgian economy and European economy, there will be an increase in labor demand. what about you guys? Do you think AI finally will kill jobs, or will it create jobs, or will it just kill a certain number of specific tasks? Katelijne, perhaps you could try on that one.
Yeah, I find this question always very difficult to answer. There is quite a number of studies done that vary from basically 9% of jobs that could be affected by AI to 50. There are people that say we will lose all jobs. We will have to busy ourselves with completely different things in the future. And there are people that are saying we will gain jobs because of these developments. I think that before we should answer this question, that it would be wiser and more pertinent at this point in time to look at how does AI currently land in the workplace? What does it do to the workplace? Because if we start there, then we can see what kind of jobs will be lost or gained and what kind of skills are actually necessary. And I would like to give you an example of that. We talk a lot about AI should augment people. It should augment humanity, and it should take over all the dangerous, dirty, dull work, leaving us with a sea of time to do more interesting things. And in reality, I think it's not that simple, because first of all, humans tend to trust automated systems. We've all seen the example of the American judges who relied on a recidivism risk system that turned out to be biased against minorities. And why did they do that? Because the algorithm didn't go to law school, the judges did. But they followed the system blindly. We don't exactly know why. They were pressed for time maybe, or the system was sold to them as perfect, or they were not allowed to deviate from the system's outcome. So those are elements that we have to look at. And what you hear now is that we need human oversight, and we need a human in the loop to make sure that this human augmentation actually takes shape. Would that solve the problem? Not always. While it's a good intention, there are examples where a human in the loop enhances the problem. That is not to say that the human in the loop should go. It's to say that the human in the loop is not just a human that should look at a decision and that's that. This human should be educated how to work with the AI system. For example, there are cases where for humans in the loop had to look at an AI decision that had detected somebody as a social fraudster. The result of that detection was that human tended to look and look and look and try to find the fraudulent behavior, no matter what. So what happened was that the human in the loop started to distrust himself or herself. What you also see is that AI system can make us complacent and think, well, the computer says so, so I have to follow this decision. What we really need at this point, I think, is when the systems land in the workplace, that the humans that have to work with the systems are trained on how to work with those systems. Yeah. And there we have to know what the systems can and cannot do, because we all hear people saying these systems are really complicated and they're really bright. They're actually quite brittle, and some of them are even quite stupid. So we really have to start there before saying, well, what is the job loss and the job gain? We can influence that from the ground up.
Okay. Francois, I come back to you. What do you think? Will AI either robotize our work, or will it just, or will it rather humanize our work?
I think that everything that can be robotized will be done by the machine sooner or later, and therefore only things that are much more human specific will be left And so in a way, that could be for the better, but we have to be trained, because unfortunately, a lot of our training is indeed turning us into robots. When you just check multiple choice questions, if this can be evaluated by a machine, then the machines can do it better than you. Same for many skills. And so I think we have to have a creative education and training system so that we have creative jobs in the future, and that's quite important, I think. I want to pick up on what Laurent was saying as well, talking about distributed governance. I think that the question of governance will have to be re-asked more systematically. Who would take decision? Is it us or is it the machine? Is it I as an individual, or is it us? And then who is the us? Who is the collective that is deciding? Does it depend on the scale? I mean, we already have some conversations around these issues with subsidiarity principles within Europe, for instance. But it's going to be a much broader question. Okay, since Athens, we've sort of the citizens definition. But what is a global citizen today? Can you weigh in on global decisions? At the moment, none of us is a global citizen. And not everyone is a citizen, even at the local level. Say children, they are not considered as citizens. Why not? In Athens, women were not. And during the Enlightenment, they were still not. And when you ask, why we cannot take decisions, very often it's because we are not well educated enough. So, is only the machine educated well enough to take decision? Is it the children that we should educate? Is it us as citizens that, will we be educated enough to be considered responsible? And so I think we have to rethink about democracy and citizenship and decision-making, and maybe machines can help us be more efficient. So why do we vote only every 5 years? Why not much more often? How can we redesign the whole decision ecosystem around us?
Okay, thank you for that, Francois. Let's move on to the skills needs evolution with you, Eckhard. I see two ways, two evolutions. First of all, a need, of course, of AI expertise, and on the other hand, a need of AI adoption for the large amount of citizens. What are your ideas on the specific skill need we are faced with?
Well, I think that the balance is clearly towards AI adoption. Already now we see that we are not actually adopting enough, in a sense, of these digital tools. I think that the diffusion of these processes and technologies throughout the economy is not particularly high, which is one of the reasons why we see all these inequalities I mentioned before. And partly it's related to the fact that we actually don't necessarily have the necessary skill in much of the workforce, in the adult workforce, if you want, that is ready to adopt and to take up these new technologies. Younger generation, I mean, my kids, they love it. They use these technologies all the time, and they will have no problem whatsoever. I don't think that the actual programming of these tools obviously will be important. We will need software engineers. We will be even more need more software engineers in the future, but we certainly will not need all the people that are coming into the labor markets in the next decade to actually become software engineers. But we need to kind of lower the adoption rate. We need to lower maybe the fear and the knowledge about how to use these tools responsibly, as Catalina was saying. I think that's exactly the point. How to use these tools responsibly, how to understand what you're feeding into the system, and how do you actually also understand what the system gives back to you in terms of it's only a recommendation in a sense. It's not you don't give the decision to the machine. You kind of take this as a recommendation, and then at the end of the day, it's you who are deciding it. So I think these kind of almost soft skills will be important. And I think Francois mentioned it at the very beginning. So we need to have skills that are complementary to what the machine can do. And one example I want to give, and I will conclude with that, is that half of the investment in AI globally is on robot process automation, which is to say things that kind of make the processes in the company working easier. So for instance, accounting is a typical task where a lot of things can be done automatically. Now I'm a good colleague or friend of mine. He's an accountant. He has his own company. I asked him, so are you worried that the machines will take off your job? He said, no, I don't find enough accountants. Why is that? So that you can actually have all the mundane, the routine jobs will be taken over by machines. But that means that you as an accountant actually can focus on the complicated stuff where you can make money. And so you find actually those people who have this mindset to understand what is needed for an account, this complex, the complexity behind. That's where you need the cognitive skills and and where you actually complementary to the machine. Let the machine do this, the mundane jobs, the routine jobs, but you focus on the complicated stuff. But you need to have the skill set that is complementary, and you need to be able to use this machine responsibly in a way that it actually supports your work. So that's for me the key aspect to it. How do we deliver skills both for younger generation and for the actual workforce that help them to use these technologies responsibly to make their job better?
Okay, thank you, Laurent. Are you familiar with AI-related projects run already in our companies, and what kind of roles, what kind of profiles do you see executing those projects?
That's too broad, really, and it depends from sector to sector. So I guess it's impossible to say, really.
Could you pick a specific one?
Which one would I take? Look, if I look at the way we work, for example, we work with a company which is doing payments for. So definitely, as Eckhart was just saying, all the repetitive tasks that Francois called the robotic tasks, they are being gradually eliminated. But once again, in all activities, there are more human or noble tasks to be performed, and those are growing, and people can dedicate more time to them because they are eliminating the more robotic tasks and leaving them to machines. So as Eckhart and Francois were saying, I really do not believe that there will be a real problem in terms of job. Well, there will be an issue in terms of retraining people so that they can evolve into performing the more, let's say, psychological, spiritual tasks related to their previous jobs. And that's the challenge to me, really, in terms of education, retraining, and moving up the ladder in terms of the complexities of the tasks they were performing so far. But I wouldn't single out specific types of activities which would be doomed totally.
You have one or two recommendations for the educational system in relation to this?
The only one that comes to my mind right now is to really embrace what I evoked earlier, this approach of collaborative governance. Why? Because you see, the problem with the current way of organizing work is that it limits yourself and people to a specific function most of the time. And therefore, this function is broad, unclear, and sometimes it is just scrapped and the people with it. If you move down into the roles, the real roles, which are within those functions, then it becomes more clear. People have not just one function, but several roles. And as some of the roles disappear, other roles come in. And therefore, there is much more fluidity in the way to adapt to your roles and responsibilities within the organization without having to be fired or recruit some people with new functions, etc. Become more agile and fluid thanks to this new way of looking at the work and focusing on the specific roles that people can have and have multiple roles within different groups, within different business units and so on. And I think that would be a way forward.
Okay, not going to ask only for recommendations to the educational system, Catalina. I would like to also ask what companies could do more to take their responsibility in the educational path.
Yes, that's a very good question, and I also want to briefly touch upon your questions to Laurent earlier when you ask in AI project within organizations, how could that be structured and who should be involved? And what we've been seeing and what we've been saying is that you should involve a number of experts from around your organization or hire them from outside. For example, if you look at a public institution such as a tax authorities, what we see a lot is that there is a separate unit that works on data analytics and AI, and they develop all kinds of things and then throw them into the organization for everybody to then use. What we have been seeing that has caused some serious problems, for example, here in the Netherlands. And what we have been advising them to do is that not have just the data department or the data analytics department take the lead in this, but make a team where you have the legal department involved, where you have the front office involved, also the men and women that are on the phone with people that do or do not receive benefits anymore, for example, because of an AI decision. They will have to know why that is and how they can explain that, and also involve policy and management to not just throw down the example, fix this with data, and then it will be dealt with. So we call this multidisciplinary teams around the development and deployment of artificial intelligence, starting, of course, with the question: is this a technology that is going to solve the problem that we have? Because what we also see a lot is that we see people throwing technology at the problem in the hope that it will stick. And sometimes a much simpler solution is right in front of your eyes. So this critical approach within organizations, we find a multidisciplinary approach, we find very important. And that is also something that we should try to incorporate in our organization. And in fact, with my organization, we are now working on an Erasmus Plus project to develop educational material for higher education institutions to teach trustworthy AI, the AI that came from according to the ethics guidelines of the high-level expert group. So we are looking at, should this be taught only to the data scientists, or should it also perhaps in legal education play a role when there will be work done with AI, for example? How should this be integrated? A much more multidisciplinary approach to the topic would be my advice.
Okay, so this interdisciplinary perspective, you come back on that point every time. That's a good thing, Catalina. You're really convinced. Diversity, complementarity, Francois, this has to sound good to you.
Clearly, I think the only way to understand a complex issue is to watch it from different angles. You have to integrate the perspective of different disciplines, but also of different stakeholders. And so not all of them are as well trained into the technicalities, but if they're going to be affected by the impact of that technology, then one way or the other, we have to find a way to integrate them into the discussion. In order to do that, even complex issues like, climate change, for instance, we just had in France the climate convention, where citizens were, randomly picked from the global population to have their perspective. And of course, it takes time, but you can train them and they can, reach a consensus among them that, then can be proposed to the whole country. And it's very interesting to see that, you can have them understand the complexity of climate change and social impact and economical dimensions. So if we can do this for something as complex as climate change, I think we can do it for most of the questions that are related to the arrival of AI in our societies. And indeed, you may want to have the AI part of the conversation, but there is some places where AI are doing some of the hiring of people, for instance, and are taking different type of decisions that affect human beings. But you may want to have a human in the loop somewhere, and in order to make sure that we are collectively taking the wisest decision. You know, some people in the chat on YouTube were talking about the Leviathan and so on. You know, is there a superior intelligence that will be taking decision for us, or you know, is it all collective that can contribute to be that superior intelligence? That's really what we have to be discussing progressively. And it means we have to train people very differently, because at the moment, you know, they are trained each in their silos of their disciplines, competing with one another, rather than, you know, invited to collaborate to discuss these open issues together and learn from each other and reach some consensus.
Okay, thank you. Ekkehard, I will allow you to start wrapping up in 5 minutes. But first of all, let's, for 3 or 4 more minutes, let's go back to the very beginning of this session, where Petra de Sutter was talking about inclusion, about women. You were all saying that creativity, ethics are topics that are really important in an AI context. Is this the door we should open? And is this the door where we should invite women to come in? Katelijne, and then after that, Laurent?
Yeah, I understand your question, and because we at Ally, we were founded by 3 women, and we talk about responsibility in artificial intelligence. So at least 2 of us are sometimes a bit struck by these type of questions, to say that ethics is a women's issue, and I don't agree with that, and I don't see that, and so I think that we also have a lot of men involved, to be honest, and also the high-level expert group was 50-50 women and men. It could be that that there is more interest from women in these topics. I don't know. I don't have the experience to answer that. But what I want to say is that, for example, the larger European multi-annual financial framework now has a lot of money available, for example, for 2 pillars. One is green, the Green Deal, and one is digital. And if we do not make sure that women enter that digital field somehow, a lot of women will also not be able to benefit from all those incentives that now come from Europe to build things, and I think that the element of responsibility, of ethics, but also I want to say this again, of the legal impacts and the socio-economic impact, that should be an umbrella over the entire topic of artificial intelligence. And well, we should include women in that anywhere we can, and that is not only in the technical elements, but also indeed in the ethical and the societal elements of it. Where they will land is up to them, to be sure.
Thank you, Katelijne. I apologize. Sometimes you need a stupid question to get an intelligent answer. So my apologies. Laurent, any ideas on the inclusion topic?
On the inclusive part, I would say just the following. You mentioned women. I would rather speak of the feminine part that we all have, just like we have a masculine part. And I would just say that I believe that AI will allow us to diminish the power of the masculine part in all of us and let emerge much better, hopefully, the feminine part in all of us, whether we are women or men. And I think that when we mention the psychological elements, the spiritual elements that machine cannot have, I think they are much more associated, at least in my eyes so far, to the feminine side of us, to let things emerge. So in a way, and paradoxically maybe, AI will allow a less robotic society and a more feminine one.
That's a quite interesting one to conclude upon, I want to
I
thank
don't want to
all-
conclude with that.
No, but no problem. I think it's a good one. I think it's a good one. There still is the wrap up of Eckhart. So he will do the conclusions. I want to thank Catalina for your intervention. Laurent, thank you for participating. Of course, Francois, much appreciated that you were there and gave us such great insights. I left you alone for a little while, Eckhart, but now it's up to you to do a wrap up on whatever you think was inspiring during this session. So here you go.
Yeah, thank you, Jeroen, and thanks for all your co-panelists for an exciting discussion. I mean, I guess these things can go on for more than 90 minutes, for sure. It's just, I mean, maybe I start with the diversity question because I really feel very strongly about this myself. I mean, just to reassure you, Catalina, it's not only a women's topic; it's also a topic for men, and especially for men like me who have a young daughter. I mean, I want my daughter also to succeed in life. I think that I look at this really almost from a dollar's perspective. You know, I mean, not having women on the table is just that's no longer an option. You know, I think you need it. I mean, and Francois put it very nicely. You need the diversity of perspective to understand a complex problem. I think there's just no way around it. And for me, I mean, I'm a strong believer that if you need to have strong policy decision on this, for instance, having quotas or so, let's do it. If we cannot solve the problem differently, but I wanted to start my summary maybe from the very beginning. I think we started out very nicely on this jobs perspective and discussed a bit. You know, obviously. Typically, people tend to overemphasize the job destruction because you know what the jobs that are there and you know what are the technologies, what is the risk for it. But I think that we eventually moved on and saying, well, there is a huge potential for new creation, for new jobs, especially when we kind of manage to get rid of all this routine, mundane tasks that we actually really feel very strongly that should be done by machines rather than by ourselves. It does depend, however, and I think that came out of the discussion as well, it does depend, however, on country circumstances. And maybe one element that we didn't talk about is that it does depend on demographics as well. We get older, we as a society, as all of us obviously as well, and it makes it more challenging because you need to reorganize maybe our education system, which is very much focused on the young and not so much on lifelong learning. So we need to understand a bit better what kind of changes to our education system, what kind of change to our incentive structure to pick up new competences we need to bring in. One thing I take out from this also is it's also a question about transitions. You know, when somebody loses a job, obviously he or her doesn't want to kind of stay unemployed, but wants to move to a new opportunity. Trying to find opportunities to get these transitions done, and not only through education, but also through professional reorientation throughout the entire career path, I think is important. And I want to pick up on what Laurent was saying, that actually AI is a great tool for developing or possibilities to reorient people across the occupational pathways, because it will become more challenging as we get more educated, as we become more older. It will be more complicated for us to find ways throughout this complex web of occupations. I think that's important. And if you want to, in addition to bring in the diversity dimension that we all feel very strongly about, I think that makes it even more complex. And having an AI tool, a properly set up AI tool, I think it's important. One element, I think, and I want to conclude with this, I think we need to kind of think about issues beyond just jobs that we discussed very much about. We need to talk about inequality clearly. I mean, not only about diversity, but inequality in terms of actually benefiting all of us from these new technologies, maybe finding new ways of supporting people that lose their jobs in terms of UBI or new forms of social security, digital social security. But I think it's important also to think about the societal dimension of these technologies in terms of addressing other issues, not only jobs. I think that Laurent and Francois both highlighted, for instance, on climate change or issues related to energy, and obviously ethical considerations more broadly in other dimensions. I mean, I think, Catalina, you were the one who mentioned health application. Now we are all living in this pandemic, obviously. That will be an enormous challenge to use this technology for identifying these kind of existential risks and preparing us for new challenges. I think that I personally am probably, because I'm by nature an optimist, I think that these technologies can really help us. But we need to focus, and I think that's where I would say where our position is always with respect to policymakers, it needs to have the hand of the policymaker to orient these tools in a way, or to orient the research of these tools in a way that it actually has a societal positive implication. So thank you very much again for having me, and I'm looking forward for more discussion with all of you.
Thank you, Eckhard. Mostly, Nathanael in the AI for Belgium coalition always has the real last word. So, Nathanael, here you go.
Okay, thank you very much. It's just to introduce maybe the next session. It was fascinating. It has been recorded, and so you will have the opportunity to see it again. I would like to invite all the speakers also to participate to the closing ceremony that will take place tomorrow at 6 p.m. For 30 minutes. Now, just to introduce the next session, we will have in 30 minutes a keynote from Pascal Coppens about AI in China that is entitled AI China, the first AI superpower. Then we will have Mieke de Ketelaar that will tell us a bit more about her new book, Human versus Machine. And afterwards, a special keynote from Anouk Wieprecht about fashion tech and AI. Then we will have the presentation of the barometer of AI adoption within Belgian hospital, and a debate, a citizen debate at the end, organized by UMONS, on artificial intelligence versus human intelligence at 8 p.m. So enjoy your week. Tomorrow, it will be the European AI Day in the morning session that has been organized by Joanna Gordon. We will welcome 10 national hubs from all Europe and discuss how to collaborate better. Tortoise will present also its global AI index. And as you know, Belgium has jumped 7 ranks last year in this global AI index. Olga Oos will be there also to introduce the session. He's the head of the Claire network. And at the end, we will have a conclusion by the European Commission and the participation of Thomas Dermine on the relaunch plan. That is only for the morning session, but I invite you to participate to this European AI Day. Thank you so much, Jeroen, for having organized that. And you have the last word, please.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Nathanael, to do this for the Belgian AI Coalition. Thanks to all panelists. Hope we will meet soon in real life, because we got a hell of a job in front of us. Let's stick and let's work together. Thank you. Bye-bye.